The whispers of Eldon Grove were a mystery long before I arrived in Brarefield. Nestled in the heart of a sleepy, unassuming town, the woods loomed large in both landscape and local folklore. I wasn't looking for myths or ghost stories when I moved here. All I wanted was a fresh start, a place to breathe, to write, and to remember who I was after the divorce that had torn apart the life I thought I'd built so carefully. Eldon Grove called to me in ways I couldn't explain. Its dense canopy, the ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets among themselves, the unnatural quiet, it all felt magnetic. Maybe it was foolish to believe that solitude in those woods would bring clarity to my muddled mind, but I had no better plan. It started innocently enough. Morning walks along the narrow, winding trails became part of my routine. The mist that clung to the forest floor softened the world, making it feel like a dreamscape. The silence wasn't oppressive, not at first. It was comforting, like the forest itself was listening. And then I met Darren. It was on one of those misty mornings when I saw him for the first time. He emerged from the fog like a figure out of some pastoral painting. Rugged, charming, his easy smile and weathered backpack, giving him the air of someone who belonged here far more than I did. He waved, called out a cheerful good morning, and struck up conversation as though we'd known each other for years. He seemed fascinated by my story, how I was a writer, how I'd come here to escape the noise of my old life. In turn, he told me about the forest, weaving tales of its beauty and its dangers. His voice was warm, reassuring, and utterly captivating. We started meeting more often, by chance at first, or so I thought, but soon became clear that Darren knew these woods far better than I ever would. He had an uncanny ability to appear just when I was losing myself in thought, offering stories or advice that seemed tailored to whatever I was grappling with that day. One evening, he suggested something that made me hesitate. "Let's take a moonlit hike," he said. His smile so inviting it almost made me forget how the idea sent a shiver up my spine. The woods are different at night, alive in a way you can't imagine. I laughed nervously. Alive? Sounds like something out of one of my stories. "Maybe," he said, his tone playful, but his eyes serious. "But there's a beauty to it. You have to see it to understand." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The night of the hike was crisp and clear, the moon casting an eerie glow over the forest. Darren led the way, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. Though he didn't seem to need it, he moved with the confidence of someone who knew every twist and turn. At first, the hike was enchanting. The forest did feel alive, the rustling leaves and faint sounds of nocturnal creatures creating a symphony of movement. But as we ventured deeper, something shifted. Darren's demeanor changed. His stories, once charming, turned dark. He spoke of hikers who had disappeared, of spirits that lured the unwary into the depths of Eldon Grove, never to return. I tried to laugh it off, but the unease grew with each step. The trees seemed to close in, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The air grew colder, heavier. "We should head back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Darren stopped and turned to me, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Don't you want to see the heart of the forest?" "No," I said firmly. "This is far enough." And then he was gone. One moment he was there. The next he had melted into the shadows. I called his name, but only silence answered. And then the whispers began. They came from everywhere and nowhere, a low, insistent murmur that seemed to rise and fall with my heartbeat. They weren't words, at least not words I could understand, but they compelled me, pulling me deeper into the forest. Panic set in as I realized the trail was gone. The familiar landmarks I had grown accustomed to during my walks had vanished, replaced by trees that seemed impossibly ancient, their gnarled roots twisting like fingers through the earth. And then I saw him. Darren stood ahead of me, but he was wrong. His features were distorted, his smile stretched too wide, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "Elaine," he whispered, his voice layered with tones that didn't belong to him. "You've come so far. Don't you want to see what lies beyond?" I turned and ran. The whispers followed, growing louder, more urgent. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light that only seemed to deepen the shadows. My foot caught on something, and I fell hard, scraping my hands on the rough forest floor. That's when I found the campsite. It was abandoned, the tent shredded, the supplies rotting. But what caught my attention was the diary. Its pages were damp, the ink smeared in places, but the words were still legible. Darren's name leapt out at me. He had been real once. A hiker who loved these woods, who had disappeared years ago. The final entry spoke of whispers, of being drawn to something he couldn't resist. And then they stopped. The realization hit me, like a punch to the gut. Darren hadn't just been leading me into the woods. He had been leading me into a trap. The whispers swelled, a cacophony of voices urging, pleading, commanding. My vision blurred, and the world spun around me. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Darren's monstrous face, inches from mine. When I woke, I was at the edge of Eldon Grove, the first light of dawn breaking through the trees. My hands were clean, my flashlight unbroken, as though none of it had happened. But it had. I could still hear the whispers, faint and lingering, as I stumbled back to my cabin. That night, I wrote furiously, pouring every detail into my journal. The story became my bestseller. But the success brought little comfort. Even now, the whispers remain, a constant reminder of what I left behind in Eldon Grove, or perhaps what I brought back with me. The whispers started as faint murmurs, like a distant hum carried on the breeze. I was working in my studio, surrounded by unfinished canvases and the smell of turpentine when I first heard them. At first, I thought it was just the wind threading its way through the dense forest outside my cabin. But then one night, the whispers grew distinct. They weren't random sounds of nature. They were voices. Faint, pleading voices. "Help us," they whispered, soft as a sigh. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the shadowy outlines of the trees through my window. Every creak of the cabin felt magnified. Every rustle in the underbrush, a phantom lurking just out of sight. When the sun finally broke through the thick canopy, I decided to follow the sound. The forest of Blackthorn Valley was ancient. Its trees gnarled and twisted as if frozen mid-scream. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. The air was thick, heavy, and the usual chirping of birds or rustling of leaves was absent. It was as if the forest held its breath, waiting. Then I found the first cabin. It was a skeletal structure, the wood gray and crumbling with age. A chill ran down my spine as I pushed open the warped door, the hinges groaning like a warning. Inside, the air was stagnant and cold, carrying a faint metallic scent that made my stomach churn. It was there among the rotting beams and collapsing walls that I found the first traces of them. Scraps of cloth, a tiny shoe, and carvings etched into floorboards. Names. Children's names. From that moment, I couldn't stay away. Each day, I ventured deeper into the forest, discovering more abandoned cabins. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I began to understand their words. They were the voices of children, lost and afraid, their pleas filling my mind even when I wasn't in the woods. I started crafting puppets to honor them, to give their voices a body. Driftwood became their limbs, moss their hair, and I painted their faces with vibrant pigments extracted from berries and bark. Each puppet bore the name of a child I had found carved into floorboards of those forsaken cabins. I dressed them in clothes scavenged from ruins, small shirts, tattered dresses, shoes with worn soles. The puppets weren't just art to me. They were alive. I could feel their presence, faint but undeniable. They moved when I wasn't looking, shifting slightly, their glassy eyes glinting with something that felt too much like recognition. At night, I held tea parties for them, setting tiny porcelain cups before their wooden hands. We had conversations, though I was the only one speaking aloud. Still, I swore I could hear their responses, faint and ghostly, just beyond the edge of hearing. The villagers thought I was mad, of course. They whispered about me, the reclusive artist who had lost herself in the dark heart of the valley. I didn't care. I had a purpose now, one that filled the aching void in my chest. These children needed me. They needed someone to listen, to care, to save them from being forgotten. But then one day, everything unraveled. A child went missing, a little boy named Daniel. His face was plastered on posters nailed to trees and pinned to the bulletin board at the general store. Search parties combed the valley, their shouts echoing through the trees. I avoided them, my heart pounding every time I heard their boots crunching through the underbrush. I knew they wouldn't understand. And then they found one of my puppets. It was in the clearing behind my cabin, sitting at a tiny table with a tea set I'd found in an abandoned attic. The puppet wore Daniel's clothes, his favorite red jacket, and little blue sneakers. The searchers recoiled when they saw it, their eyes wide with horror. The whispers in the forest turned to screams. The authorities came next, tearing apart my cabin, my studio, everything. They unearthed shallow graves beneath the abandoned cabins I'd frequented, each one containing the remains of a child. The driftwood puppets were more than what they seemed. Hidden beneath the moss and bark were human bones. They accused me of horrific things, but they didn't understand. I wasn't the one who had killed those children. I had saved them. Their spirits had been trapped, forgotten in the darkness of the woods, and I had given them new bodies, new lives. But no one believed me. The night before they could take me away, I fled into the forest. The whispers guided me, leading me deeper and deeper into the world beyond the trees faded away. I became one with the forest, my voice mingling with the echoes of the children I had tried to save. Now, on cold nights when the wind howls through Blackthorn Valley, locals swear they can still hear me. Come, my children, I call, my voice thin and brittle as the frost on the trees. Come home, and the forest answers.